Thanks for our last talk, and thanks for joining this one. So, in our last talk, we talked about ideation and effective ways of ideation, right? Now, we talk about the first step for making a hyper casual hit game. How do you validate your idea? What does it mean? Is your concept marketable, right? What does that mean? Would you find a large enough audience for a price that's lower than the lifetime value of your game? Each publisher has their different benchmarks or KPIs like CTR, or CPI, or IPM, but the process is the same. And the thumb rule of making a profitable hyper casual game is the same, right? But how does it start? Starts by testing your marketability metrics using a 15 or 30-second video of your gameplay to see how does the audience engage with it. Now, for this, we have Neil Regev, who is the publishing team lead at Supersonic, one of the top and most popular and recognizable hyper casual publishers in the world, who is going to talk about something that every hyper casual publisher probably is looking for, making the next hit game, which is tips for maximizing your prototype's potential and nailing your CPI video. The floor is yours, Neil. And thanks for joining today.
Thanks so much. Happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me. And yeah, let's dive into it. Let me share my screen. Cool. So hi again. I'm Nir. I'm leading the publishing team here in Israel. So today we'll talk about how to maximize your prototype's potential, focusing on gameplay and best practices for videos. Just a quick snapshot on Supersonic. So we're Iron Source Publishing Solution. Started activity early 2020. Already published 38 successful games. We're growing pretty fast already. 110 person team. Our headquarters is in Tel Aviv, Israel, but we have offices and the teams is worldwide. Yeah, and again, super happy to be here. So for today's agenda, we're basically gonna focus on the three main points for cracking the marketability of the initial test, which is the keys for the gameplay elements, the creative best practices, and closing the loop with the marketability evaluation of your test results. Cool. Starting with a quick snapshot of the full funnel of the publishing. So the initial test is obviously the first step, which we're testing the concept and focusing on the marketability. The second test we're doing is basically an advanced marketability test to see a wider picture of the marketability potential of the game before investing more time and resources on building a full game. Kill or iterate, this is basically after seeing the full marketability potential and valuation. Then moving to retention test, building your game for retention playtime, for enough content for users to play the game at least till day 7. And monetization test, which is basically seeing how the in-game metrics turning into the LTV. So starting with the terrible FOMO, every hyper-casual game developer is having, which basically is my concept marketable. So in this presentation, I basically try to share some tips and ways how to avoid this feeling and how to feel comfortable with the concept we're making and the decision we're making based on the test results. So let's start with defining the goal of the initial test. I think there is two main goals. The first one is obviously finding a marketable concept before investing more time and resources on the game. And the second is do it efficiently. That's why we're recommending doing a lean MVPs with the 5 to 10 levels, only enough content for the creative levels, so we can kill or iterating the game fast, this is basically what hyper-casual prototyping is all about. Three main steps for reaching those two goals. The first one is basically we want to focus only on the core gameplay to see how sticky, how clear, and follow basically the most trendy hyper-casual trends from, if it can be from top chart games, it can be from social media trends, etc. The second thing is making sure that we addressed the gameplay properly in the videos. We might have an amazing marketable concept. If we use the bad videos, we might end it up with a good and marketable concept which we dropped. So we will go over some best practices and tips for making good videos. And the third step, which is closing the loop, evaluating the marketability potential of your game. If it's the CPI only, of course not. We'll dive into it in a few seconds. Cool. Starting from step one, gameplay. So three key elements, I would say, for before doing or developing the concept for the test. So the first thing is you need to make sure that your game is super simple, super clear to understand in the first seconds. Both users are looking at the video and playing the game. Remember, your audience is hyper casual users. It's basically everyone, and you want to make sure that your game is super simple to understand. Second thing is focusing on combining successful trends. Again, it can be from other top hits, it can be from social media, etc. In the end of the day, you need to make sure that your story, goal, mechanic, theme, and controls of your game are perfectly connecting together, and you're using trendy elements inside your games. We'll go over some examples for that. The third thing, which is basically the hardest thing, the difficult one to explain and to predict, is basically the hook, which is kind of the secret sauce of every game. It's how satisfying your game is when looking at the videos of your game, when playing your game, how strong the emotions users are feeling while they're playing your game. And we also share, and I also go over some examples for this one. So, starting with the first example, we have escalators, and basically on the left video, you can see the first and the initial version of escalators. Again, it's a super simple a game using basically mechanics which you, the goal and the mechanics which you basically need to tap and hold to move people from one escalator to another in order to get them to their way to their boats in the end of the level. So on the left side, we can see basically the original video of escalators, which had in the beginning a lower CPI than 50, but stabilized around 50 cents. And after a few iterations on the video level to try to lower the CPI, we couldn't do it, and we almost dropped the game. Now, after seeing some good and trendy concept on the top charts using the multiply gates, which obviously was a huge trend, and now today using in a lot of games. We tried it to implement it in the game instead of the mechanic, which basically we had previously, which basically you have people running on the road, and you should hit them to collect them and to get more people and more points. So basically, it's the same mechanics, but using much more trendy and easy to understand multiplying mechanic in the game, and it basically almost cut the CPI by half, and was one of the basically the reason why we moved forward with the game and published it, and it was obviously a great success. So yeah. Moving to the second example from cheerleader round. So on the left side, you can see the initial test try for cheerleader. It's called card run. And basically what we try to do is using the well-known stacking mechanic, but beat in a different way, which is a pyramid-like. And obviously we saw that in the test for with the card team, it didn't perform well. It was 75 cent. After using a much more trendier theme, which is topping the charts with a lot of games, which is the female cheerleader team, basically the CPI performed much better, 21 cents for that video you're seeing on the right. And this is demonstrating basically that's basically the same, almost the same goal, almost the same gameplay with different team can make a huge change. So use super trendy theme you're seeing on both can be on the top charts and on other trend sources. Cool. Another example from interesting example from escalators would be the ending sequence. So on the middle, you can see basically the original ending sequence of the game, but we also try to test in the video level a different ending sequence, also from different trends we saw on the top charts. So on the left side, you can see basically a theme of ending sequence which you need to take over buildings, and on the right side, you can see kind of a fighting any sequence or pushing any sequence, which obviously didn't perform so well, and it helped us to understand better our users, the users of escalators, which don't look for any fighting game, but more for relaxing game to spend their time. So obviously, today in the game, the ending sequence is the original one with boats or buses or any other things like that. I think it's also a good example to demonstrate how important it is to test things in the video level before implementing it in the game. It can save you a lot of the development time, which is one of our key for efficiency. Great. Last example of the key elements for gameplay is basically 911, which obviously is a well-known narrative from life, and I think that it demonstrates super easily the hook of the game, which basically taking if we look at the videos, it's a bit small, so I added the text here down in the screen. So basically, using a stressful situation or funny situation in the game, it's what makes the hook so strong in the game. A woman that called 911 to say that her husband is cheating on her, and you can basically be in the other side and choose the funny scenario and the funny, or being like the straightforward a guy we talk with there, same as a kid who is alone at home and someone's breaking it home. I think it's a day situation from our day to day, but you can control them and use super funny answers and scenarios in stressful situations. And this is what basically create the strong hook, which you can ignore once looking at 911 videos, which had obviously amazing marketability power. Great. After talking about the key element for the gameplay, let's move forward to best practices and some tips for creatives. So first of all, the basics for creatives that you need to remember is the first one is that you should focus on the gameplay. Remember our goal. Our goal is to test the marketability of our gameplay, and that's why we should focus only on the core gameplay. Emotions are key for low CPI. The more emotions the users are watching your video will have, the lower CPI you'll have as well. And the last thing to keep in mind is you only have 3 to 7 seconds to attract user attention. So choose your best moments of your game and choose and be accurate with what you're showing in the first seconds of your video. Let's dive into some examples. The first one, so we're seeing it quite a lot, videos that starting with other screens other than the core gameplay. So please don't use like starting screens, fail screens, skin shop screen, etc. Start straight from your gameplay. This is what you want to test, and this is what you want to show for the users in the first seconds. Pretty similar example is the using of irrelevant or some real funny videos. So a lot of developers think it can help for higher conversion and better CPI, and actually it's not. So when you're when you're preparing your creative, remember the first seconds is the most important ones, and you want to make sure that you don't spend them on stupid videos, and you want to show the core gameplay, which this is what you want to test. Contrast. So contrast is a great tool and a must tool actually for highlighting the main objects of your gameplay. For instance, the characters, the obstacles, enemies, the platform, you need to make sure you have a good contrast between those main objects, so it will be easier and clearer for the user once he look at watching the video for the first time. Camera angle. So I think it's pretty straightforward. You can watch the video on the left. Basically, the first thing that my eyes is focusing at is here, which has nothing, and I can't see what's coming next in the game, and I can connect into the game and be like I'm playing it. I'm playing the game. So on the right, you can basically see a much better camera angle, which I can see what's coming next and understand the gameplay and what I should do and the controls and everything. And this is a key element for addressing your gameplay properly and making sure that users understand your core gameplay. Cool. Last example for the video. So on the left side, you can see a screenshot of the same campaign and the same ad set for a test we did on Facebook, which basically I want to demonstrate how important it is to test different scenarios of your game. For instance, we had two videos. We tested 6 videos of the same gameplay with different scenarios. 2 videos got 21 and 30 cents, which is amazing CPI, and the other one got much higher CPI. It demonstrates how important it is to use different scenarios in your game. And if we're looking at the examples, basically, I think that it's super clear to see that the videos on the top, it's almost a steroid-like gameplay. You can see super fast the input, the output. You can understand what's happening when I'm collecting people, what's happening next when I'm moving to the next platform, etc. And looking at the videos on the bottom, it's the same speed, but it's much slower. The progress is much slower, and obviously generated much higher CPI. Great. Step 3. So to wrap up, basically to close the loop after preparing your game for test, both on the gameplay side and both on the creative side, it's super important to understand how to look at the metrics of the results of your test properly, so you won't miss good concepts. So marketability evaluation and basically the marketability of your game is bringing to 3 main elements. The first one is obviously the CPI and the hard metrics. The second one is the audience, and this is a super important things to analyze when you're looking at your results by the end of the test. Hyper casual, there is an audience for classic audience for hyper casual, and it's super important, and I'll share some examples why you should do it. The third thing is multiple testing your game on multiple networks. Now, I'm not going to focus at this presentation at this stage. I'm just going to say, because it's basically the second phase of the marketability test, but I'm just going to say that we're doing the initial test on Facebook because it has a very good indication for marketability, for early marketability, and for every game that we see some potential, we're going to test it on Iron Source Network and on TikTok. Again, big networks in terms of the SDK networks, and another big social network for hyper casual games, to see basically and to understand the wider picture of the marketability of your concept. So starting with the benchmark. So this is a graph from our testing dashboard analyzing the average CPI and CPMs from Facebook, from the prototyping phase. So what we can see is basically that if we looked on February on the average CPI and the CPM is almost 50%. It's almost 2 times the 50% basically from September CPI CPM, meaning that if we looked at a 15 cent or 20 cent CPI as a good marketability indicator on Facebook in the prototyping phase on February. So probably if we look for the same number on September, we won't find any 15 or 20 cent. and we might miss a good concept. So I think this is a super important to know the benchmark and what results you're looking for when you're analyzing your test results on Facebook. Second tip, let your test run for at least 5 to 6 days. It sometimes takes Facebook algorithm to learn a few days. And for example, here, if we stop the campaign after 3 days, it will probably be at around 80 cents on October 2nd. And the average CPI would probably be more than $1, and we probably would drop the game due to high CPI. But continuing the test and letting the CPI stabilize, we probably can understand that the CPI is workable, 52 on and stabilize on 52 cents, which is definitely a workable CPI. So this is also a super important tip to mention. So let your test run for at least 5 to 6 days, and mainly look at the graph when it's stabilizing for 2-3 days, and then you can stop it and get your decisions. Cool. A great example for how important it is to look and to analyze your audience of your test is a game we tested earlier this year, which had quite a good CPI. 20 cents was the lowest CPI we got, but it stabilized around 27 cents. But looking at the audience, and we're seeing that 95% of the audience are male and quite an old male, which is obviously not the classic hyper casual audience. And once we increased the budget and tested the game across other networks, we saw that basically the CPI increased super fast, meaning that the game and the low CPI we saw was probably due to like a niche audience, which testing with a low budget and getting low traffic, Facebook can generate low CPI. But when we want to scale on other hyper casual UA channels, it won't work, and the CPI is not scalable. Great. So the key takeaways from this presentation, I think that the first and the most important one is sticking to the method. I think it's the best key for efficiency, which is what hyper casual prototyping is all about. Focusing on finding the right gameplay, follow the trends, combining good and trendy elements from other games with a twist, keep the originality of your concept, and make sure that your game is simple and clear to understand. Creatives, make sure that you address your gameplay properly and you don't miss a good concept due to bad creatives. And remember that videos are a great tool for quickly understand what your users are seeking for without investing development time on implementing it in the game before knowing it will probably work. And the last thing is closing the loop and evaluate all aspects of the marketability potential of your game, which is the hard metrics, which is the CPI, the audience, analyzing the audience, the gender, the placements on Facebook, and last thing is the advanced marketability test to see other channels as well to have a wider picture of your game's marketability potential. That's it. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you so much. I think we can move to the Q&A. Cool. So starting with the first question, the CPI is in which geo and platform? So the CPI I showed here is all of them was the initial test, and it's on Facebook, US, and the platform are basically the platforms that Facebook using, which is Instagram, Facebook feed, and Facebook audience network. Hope I answered the question. At what CPI do you publish a game? So I think it's a very good question. I think there is not a hard benchmark for CPI. we do look at the marketability potential, and in the end of the day, we need to make sure that the ratio between the CPI and the LTV, the in-game, and after adding monetization, the LTV of the game can be profitable, meaning that we can have a 15-cent CPI with a lower LTV, or we can have like 40-cent or even higher CPI with much higher LTV. In the end of the day, we need to make sure that the ratio between the LTV and the CPI is positive, and we can scale the game and make profit, of course. Next one. What should the daily budget slash installs needed to do a proper test? So it's a good question. On the initial test, basically it's very important to keep the same daily budget when you're testing your initial test, to make sure like you're comparing apples to apples. Like if you're testing it with different budget, with much higher budget, obviously the CPI wouldn't be the same, and you can't compare it to other tests you did before or to the current benchmark. So we usually recommend to test at least to set the daily budget on Facebook at least on $50 per day. And if you're using more than 4 videos, you need to add $10 more to the daily budget for each video, and not more than 6 video in the initial test is recommended on Facebook. Next one. So there is a question about CPM and CPI on Facebook. CPM along with CPI is important for question mark. IPM, what is generally a good IPM? So in Facebook, we're basically not looking at the IPM. It's more a metric that's relevant for SDK networks, which you don't have you set the CPI. And on Facebook, we're mainly looking at the CPI and comparing the CPM and following the trend of the CPM to understand the current benchmark. We see, for instance, if we'll see an increase trend in the CPM, probably for the same conversion, for the same CTR and conversion rate, we'll get higher CPI. So therefore, we're looking at the CPM to better understand the trend of the CPI, CPM on Facebook. Let's choose one more. Let's how much time I have. Cool. So there is a question on average how much time does it take from initial testing for publishing a game. So I think it's a very good question, and obviously we want to make it as soon as possible. But usually I would say it depends, of course, on the numbers, on the potential, and how good and fast we're working on the game. But in general, I would say between 2 months to 3 months. This is the numbers we should expect from the initial test to a global launch. In which market should we test our game? US or China or Asia? If we want to launch it global. So basically the testing phase is on US, as this is basically the biggest market for hyper casual. So usually we're testing it only on US, and once moving to soft launch and to global launch, opening the game worldwide and adjusting the numbers and everything in accordance to each country performance. Cool. I think this is the main questions. Great. I think this is it.
Hi there, back again. Amazing talk. Thanks again for the great insights that you share, and thanks again for taking the time to answer the questions. By the way, we have 15 more minutes if you answer more questions. And actually, I also have a couple of questions if you don't mind me asking them.
Sure, go ahead.
And this is from the many surveys that we held before the conference as to what do you want to know, right? We all see about like how important it's about to test the marketability of your games, but like it happens a lot. Like let's say you fail to achieve your CPI benchmark, you failed your marketability test. What do you think would be the most important aspects that a developer can take from the failed test as a learning for the next ideation concept?
Yeah, so I think it's a very good question. I think there is two answers. The first one is sometimes you do work on a game that looks amazing and feels amazing, and it's not always working. This is how hyper casual is working. You need the secret sauce, and we can't always predict if we'll have it in our game or not. I think that for every game we should take a look at the results, basically at everything we discussed in the presentation, and learning for the next time. Like if we have more than $2 CPI, probably we did something wrong. But if we have around 70, 80 cent CPI, we are on the track, and we just need to finalize the idea. Maybe use a more trendy elements in the game, but in general, we need to make sure that we did the best we could with the videos addressing the gameplay the best we can, and moving to the next one, I guess.
Yeah, my next one would be like, in today's highly competitive environment, especially in ecosystems like India, where there's so many people hungry for hits, right? And new studios forming or new teams forming every day. What would be your pro tip? And since Supersonic being one of the most sought after publishers in the world, what would be a pro tip for a new hyper casual developer to catch your attention and stand out from the crowd?
Not sure I understand the question. Can you repeat it?
So my question is, since there are so many people vying for your attention, sure, you're publishing dashboards and whatnot, but for a hyper casual developer who is just starting out, no track record, nothing, do you have any pro tip for them to catch your attention and stand out from the crowd?
So I guess that everyone, I invite everyone to get into our website and submit your games. Actually, I think that coming up with innovative ideas, as I said, using trendy elements with a twist, making innovation based on things that we know that works, taking good mechanics from one subgenre to other, would probably attract publisher attention, because it shows an understanding of how to find a marketable concept and a good concept, and I think this would be the best thing to do.
Yeah, probably don't go for clones, see how you stand out, right?
Sure.
My last question for you, at least from my side, would you, in terms of current market, let's say there's a hyper casual developer who's starting today, starting on making the next hit game. Do you have any pro tip on in terms of trend or idea, or rather trend? If they're starting today, what would
you? Yeah, a good question. I think that the best place to look and to feel is the top charts, looking at innovative ideas, looking at super successful games, breaking it down, understand why they're working so good. It's the team, it's the mechanic, it's the narrative of the game, and trying to make the same connection, the same feeling inside your new and innovative game. Same as looking for new ideas and new trends on social media or any other place that a lot of users are interested in. So I think this would be probably the best way to do it. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you again so much for all the information you shared, and thanks for coming here and sharing with the ecosystem. I'm sure a lot of people will appreciate it. And if any one of you want to reach out to Supersonic to work with them, what would be the best way? They come to your website and sign up into your platform, right?
Sure. So basically, you can reach out the Supersonic website, submit your game, or contact us via email. Also, I'm available for any question or things you might have on near@supersonic.com. And yeah, it was also a pleasure, and thanks for inviting me. And hope to see you next time.
There you go. Thanks again. And thank you, everyone. And please don't forget to rate the session from your hands up tab and tune in for the next one. Ciao. Thanks, Nick.
Bye.